Hello, everybody. I'm Jackie K. Cooper, and we have a great interview today. Joshua Caldwell, who directed one of my favorite movies of the year so far, Mending the Line. Now, Joshua, my first question is, where can people see this movie?
So if you're lucky enough to be in the San Diego area now, we're going to be screening on 10/22 at the San Diego International Film Festival. After that, we're in the process of securing distribution, so it might be a little bit, but eventually we hope there'll be a theatrical run. But at the very least, people are going to be able to see it on all their VOD services, that they subscribe to. So, for the most part, eventually it'll come to digital. We hope for a theatrical, but at the moment, we're still an independent film, so we're currently trying to close on our distribution.
Well, I'm telling you, people are really excited about this film.
I hope so. It seems that way.
The word is getting out. So, I mean, just amazing. You're the director. How did you come to be associated with this film?
So I've been a fly fisherman for the last, 4 years or so. I lived in LA for a while, and then my family and I moved to upstate New York. And I had always been interested in fly fishing, so I started fly fishing in the area. And my manager's a fly fisherman, so we both had kind of bonded over that and talked about it. And Kelly McKendry, one of our producers, had been working with Steve, the writer, on this project for a bit, and they were starting to look at going into production, and they were starting that whole process, right? So she started calling around, trying to connect with people that had filmed in Montana, because unlike LA or Atlanta, or some of these New York, some of these areas around the country, not a lot of stuff is being shot in Montana. And she wanted to see, well, what's the process? Do you have to bring a lot of crew in? What does that look like? And she called my manager, because my manager had produced a movie that took place in Montana but wasn't filmed there. He let her know that, but like any good manager, he said, well, what's the movie about? And she said, it's the story of a wounded veteran who learns how to fly fish. And he said, do you have a director? She said, no. And he's like, well, I've got your director. Let me send him the script.
I got a director.
Let me pitch it to him. Exactly. And so they sent me the script, and I just said, I have to do this, and I pitched them, and they brought me on as a producer. And you'll have to ask Steven, but one of the things Steven said was, Kelly came to them and said, oh, and the director's also a fly fisherman. Steven said, yeah, we'll see. And then he looked at my Instagram, and my Instagram is all fish. So he was like, okay, I believe this guy. And so that's how I came to be on. And that was in the fall of 2020 that I came on board.
Well, let me ask you this. When I was looking up the film and things, there is a documentary movie called Mending the Line.
Yes.
And is the movie based? I didn't watch the documentary, so I don't know. But is it
unrelated except by title?
Because it's a fly fisherman too type.
Yeah. Yep. And we felt, we were aware of that documentary. That documentary it's a fantastic documentary. It's about a veteran named Frank Moore, who's kind of a huge guy, big guy in the fly fishing industry, recently passed away, unfortunately. And he was a soldier during World War II. And what he wanted to do was when he was in battle, he saw these beautiful rivers in France, and he wanted to someday go back and fly and fish them. And so that's what the documentary is. It's a short documentary. It's about 50 minutes, I believe. Worth checking out, I think. But for us, while we have a similar title, we just felt that for us, the title really spoke to the film and said what it was about. And so we decided to keep it, and felt that the films are different enough.
And that line is a part of the dialogue in the film.
Exactly.
In the movie, I mean, this is really a random thought, but it hit me. One of your characters makes a statement that there have been more stories written about fly fishing than any other sport in history. You remember that?
No. Yeah, Ike tells that to Coulter. Yeah.
Is that a true statement?
Well, it's I don't know if it's a true statement if you really tallied it all up, but you get a lot of literature about fly fishing, whether it's Hemingway, all the way back to, the Complet Angler, which is one of Isaac Walton, and you find out obviously, a river runs through it. I mean, it's for some reason fly fishing lends itself to sort of the literary pursuit. It might be that Ike's character is being a little bit, generous and biased in his estimate of it. But, what it does is it sends Coulter off to, find out more about it. And I think that, for me as a both a reader and a fly fisherman, I mean, I can tell you from the books of John Gierak to the books of Steve Ramirez, Hemingway. I mean, I have a shelf that's full of just books about fly fishing, whether it's essays or how to tie flies or whatever that is. And so it is quite depth. I mean, I believe Lions Press, which publishes numerous fly fishing books, including Steve Ramirez's book, which we used in the film. I think they're almost exclusively fly fishing books. So there's quite a business there. And it's not a wide, but it's a very, very passionate group of buyers.
Well, I didn't, I suppose I have read The Sun Also Rises at some point, but I didn't know there was anything about fly fishing in The Sun Also Rises.
Yeah, Jake and I forget the friend's character name. Before they go to Spain for the running of the bulls, they go to another part of Spain to fly fish. It's a small section of the book. It's not big, but they do get into some fly fishing. I think one of them fishes worms, which is on the border of whether that's okay or not, but it's Hemingway, so we'll forgive him.
No. Let him do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
How about the casting of the movie? Were you involved in any way with the casting of the movie?
Yeah, I mean, as the director, certainly there are situations where you come into a project and somebody's already involved, but in this case, that was not the case. And so I, from the get-go, was involved in casting.
Well, you got an amazing cast.
Yes, we did. We were very lucky.
And I feel so ignorant because Sinqua Walls. Yep. I was not familiar with him at all.
No, and most people aren't. He had done a number of TV shows. I knew of him because he was in Friday Night Lights back, when the show was on. But that was a long time ago. And he's been doing some steady work since. Right before he did our movie, he was in a movie called Nanny, which won Sundance and was at Toronto, and Amazon. It's coming out on Amazon. And then he got cast right after our movie. He went and did White Men Can't Jump, the reboot of that. So we got him, right as his star was ascending.
On the rise.
Yeah,
well, he strides through this movie with complete confidence. The movie doesn't work without him, to me.
No, I mean, it's all him. He's in almost every scene.
If you don't immediately like and identify with him, then you don't get the full emotional impact of the movie, and he delivers.
Absolutely. And I think, with the role, it's sort of there's a duality to it, right? He has to project the sort of confidence and the attitude and the physicality of a Marine, somebody that's spent, since they were probably 18, spent their time there, and that gets deep inside you, right? And yet at the same time, he's got to show a vulnerability. He's got to be, open to, the emotions and things that come with this role and what he's going through. And so I think that's what, really attracted me to Sinqua when we were looking at casting him was, for me, it was the eyes. It often is the eyes, but with Sinqua's eyes, I could see that he looks like a Marine, right? There's that you can't fake, you either look like you've been in the Marines or you don't. And, in terms of Sinqua though, but that looking for that vulnerability, looking for that balance of sort of stoicism with, emotional vulnerability, I could see that he had that in his eyes, whether that was watching his other roles or talking to him over Zoom. And that was what definitely attracted me to him and made me feel that he would pull this role off really
That,
well.
it's funny that you said that, because I review movies, and I just reviewed the movie Don't Worry, Darling. And one of the things I said was Florence Pugh just fascinates me because there's always something going on
Yeah.
behind her eyes.
Yep.
And it shows to me the intelligence of the actor, because that's your gateway.
Yeah.
And
And
you're
and I
right.
always
Cinqual had that in this. You went into his character through his face and eyes and demeanor, and it was transportive.
Yeah. And so when you're looking for somebody to carry that load,
I think he's
Cinquil
going
was
to
our
be a
guy.
huge star. I
Oh
really
yeah,
do. Yeah.
I believe it too. I thought he was fantastic in the film, and I think you're right. It doesn't really work if that character doesn't pull it off. And there's a lot of different things he's got to pull off in it.
But there's him, but there's his community
Right.
of actors, and
Yeah.
everyone in that community that he becomes involved with through the VA and trying to get himself back where he can go back on active duty, which is, I thought he was just wanting to get well. He wants to go back.
Right.
Yeah. But each person who becomes a part of his group, from Patricia Heaton's character to, Wes Studi, etc., they're also strong. I mean, this is a fantastic, cohesive cast.
Yeah. It's nice. I mean, it is nice when you really can cast who you want to and cast the talent, and be in a position where that's most of your job, Um, I mean, with Brian Cox, you don't really direct Brian Cox. You don't have to. You get an understanding and a through line of that character, make sure you're on the same page, and you let him go. And that's how I like to work as a director, And so I think that when you do that, you often get, their best work. And I think that being able to let actors come in and play emotionally complex roles is a lot of fun, because I think that's what they love to do. Bringing that inner life out of these characters and characters that have dealt with some really not great things in their life, and doing that with few words, and trying to do that while in the case of like Lucy, also trying to possibly start a new relationship and yet being held back by the old relationship. And so I think there's a lot of complexity there, and a lot of that was in the script already. And so I think being able to really just cast great actors and let them do their thing. That's what's so fun about this job.
Yeah, I've never directed anything, so I don't know how a director's mind works. I've just talked to a lot of directors, but there were two particular scenes in the movie, and you can tell I really did like this movie. But there's a scene where John Coulter catches his first fish.
Yep.
And he's holding it, and Brian Cox comes up from behind him, and they've been kind of disparate.
Right. They've been challenging each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
But St. Paul Balls is holding the fish, and the scene has Brian Cox's hand, and that one gesture showed me everything about where their relationship had gotten to.
Yeah.
And it's a very emotional film for me. And
yeah, absolutely.
And that one, just him having his hand up on his shoulder was such an emotional part of the movie for me.
Yeah.
And it's just like one of those things you want to frame, freeze.
And, right.
It was, but
yeah, no, absolutely.
I know that as director, you said, now, Brian, put your hand on your shoulder.
Well, it was definitely in the script, there's that gesture. And one of the challenges with a scene like that is like, there's a lot going on. I mean, that was, there's water, there's weather, there's the sun moving, like there's all these technical things that become your focus, and so what I really try and do is is let the actors kind of play the scene, you know, and you find those moments a lot of the times. That's what's always exciting to me about a director. But you know, that was definitely it definitely specified that in the script, whether Brian sort of did that because it said it in the script or he felt connected to it. But one of the interesting things about you pointing that out is, like, you know, we did a lot of work with real Marines on this. We worked with the Marine Corps Entertainment Liaison Office. So that's what allowed us to shoot our opening.
I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Yeah. So it's the same thing where, like, you know, Tom Cruise gets to shoot on carriers for Top Gun. It's the same deal. It goes through the Department of Defense, you know, and they partner with us. They provide all this stuff that we get to use. So we can talk more about that later. But my point in saying that was, we had one of them watching it, and he specifically pointed out that scene of Brian with his hand on Sinqua's shoulder. He's like, that's the Marine Corps. That's the Marine Corps right there, you know? And so, you know, we hope that that catches a lot of other people as well. And, you know, it just becomes this happy emotional accident that ends up working out, despite the fact that you're in that situation. The process is so technical, you know, it's almost like you're doing a love scene, right? When you see it all finished, it's emotional and it's beautiful and it's whatever. And what you don't see is the very precise technical thinking that all went behind it. You know, how we're choosing angles, the process of moving cameras while you're standing in a river, the safety issues. It's like, you know, it's almost a nightmare to do. And at the end of the day, though, like, but what's so great about people like Brian, people like Sinqua, you know, all the cast is like, I'm almost able to process all that other stuff because I know I don't have to really worry about them. Like, I'm certainly there to guide them and to help provide feedback. And, you know, we do multiple takes, but I know they get it, right? And I'm not worried about that. It's what I'm worried about is making sure all the other stuff is ready for when they are.
But it must be a real thrill, though, to see the finished product, see that scene, and see all of that come together. Because I want to mention another scene.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's the scene when John first takes Lucy fishing.
Yeah.
And Wes Studi's character's there, and Brian Cox's character's there. And there's this panoramic shot of all four of them in the water fishing.
Yeah. Oh, and during the montage, yeah.
Everything about that scene worked. The music, the visuals of the river, the mountains.
Yeah.
Just the fact of those rods with, you know, I'm not a fly fisherman, like I say, but the beauty of and grace of them doing that is another that scene to me. That was just everything came together.
Yeah.
To show the joy of what they did find in friendship and fly fishing and being outdoors, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you particularly remember that scene at all?
The final version or shooting it?
The final version, because
absolutely. I mean,
I have to think, Joshua, that you must look at that and think everything came together perfectly there. The way the camera panned, every technical aspect of that cohesed into one huge visual.
No, absolutely. And I think that, like, you know, when you see it, you sort, you know, for me, it's always, when you first see that first cut of the movie, it's always going like, either this is going to work or it's not going to work. And I don't know yet, you know, and I've been with this, like, kind of when you saw it, even though it was a much longer cut, it was about 2.5 hours. You realized it worked, you know? And so, in that scene in particular, like, we definitely spent, you know, a good amount of time on getting those montages right, you know, finding the fish footage, making sure that there's a story there. It's not just a random montage. Like, there is a story, there is a narrative within that montage that's being told. It's funny, it's lighthearted. And I think too, like, you know, what I really, the challenge that I sort of put towards myself as a director on this was to sort of visually mirror Coulter's journey for the audience, you know. And so, despite the fact they're on the journey, aesthetically and subjectively, our use of the camera and lighting and where we stage things mirror that progress, you know. And so that first half of the movie is really indoors, it's indoors a lot. It's closed off. It's like, artificial lighting. The first view of Montana, aside from Brian's first scene, which we had to give a little something, but Coulter's first view of Montana is through the windshield of a van. We don't give you these sweeping drone shots of Montana until he goes fishing. And then as soon as he goes fishing,
you
after
work
that,
up to those.
Your world opens up, and you sort of go, do we want to do that because we have Montana, we have beauty and all this stuff. But it's like a couple people pointed that out to me, so it does work. And I think that sort of that sequence from when Coulter and Brian first go fishing, all the way through, kind of that montage. I mean, it's one of my favorite sort of parts of the film. But it really does, like you said, I think, it becomes a very beautiful testament to not only this sport, but the feelings it evokes as you watch it happen.
And the great thing is you don't have to be a fly fisherman to get that feeling.
Right.
Because visually it encompasses it and presents it to you, and you can appreciate it as a non-sportsman in that field.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we give you enough that you sort of can understand why fly fishing, why would you do it that way? Why because a lot of people, despite its popularity, they're still not familiar with how it works. Why do this? But we give enough that you sort of can understand it and appreciate it, but not so much that it becomes a treaty on, fly fishing or anything like that. And really the beauty of this movie is that it's emotional, and that's really, really what we wanted to live in.
You got that for sure. But I'm going to give you a few more compliments. This is really, I need to find something to say, well, you really messed up there, Joshua. That was terrible.
Yeah.
But I can't. You said there's like 2.5 hours or more of film shot. One of the things I admired was the editing, because this is a journey from point A to point Z, and you never bog down.
That's great.
Everything is constantly slower, faster, so moving.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a real talent, because there were areas that, you could have lingered and given more detail or whatever, but it's a very progressive film in the editing. And did you have to throw out things that you would have loved to have kept, or?
No, there's nothing in there that we had kept, to be honest. The stuff that we took out needed to be taken out. But what was interesting for me about this editing process, different than other films, is I think, like, in the past, as a young director, there's an ego, and you're making your film, and this is about my vision and all this kind of stuff, and you end up having all these arguments about filming, whether this scene should be in, do we need this shot, right, whatever. On this film, I came into it very differently. I really felt, as the director of this film, I felt much more of a steward of Steven's script and the story we were telling. And where my sort of fights came from was about protecting the story as much as possible, protecting our telling of this story, And so when we got into editing, we had sort of put together our 2.5 hour cut, which was the kitchen sink cut, and we all watched it. And we were like, okay, all this stuff we know all this stuff's got to come out. And it became a process of whittling it down. But what I started doing was, I remember I was, I'm always seeking inspiration. I was listening to a commentary on the Traffic movie by Steven Soderbergh. And he was talking about how, like, with his editor, he was like, I remember there was a point in editing this where we came in and the middle wasn't working, and we really just started playing around and cutting stuff out entirely and seeing what worked. And I just got very inspired by that. I'm like, in previous movies, I go, well, this is it. This is what it's going to be like, because there's a very clear thread. This was different. It didn't have to have that sort of very specific plot line to it, And so I basically just started cutting. I just started taking stuff out, removing things. I think I was sending producers, a new cut of the movie every single day. And what happened was, you start stripping out and stripping out and stripping out, and you get to a point where you go, okay, now it's too much. It just isn't working. But with editing now on computers, you can do that. Why not? Try it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. My editor and I, Will Torbett, this is our and this is our fifth movie together. We have our process down. We sort of really know he knows what I like, what I'm looking for. I trust him implicitly. And so there's a real back and forth that occurs. But with this movie, it was very much about making sure there just was not a false moment if we could help it, right? There's not a false moment. There's not something that's bad. We're not keeping it in just to keep it in because we shot it or because I love it or whatever. It really was like, let's make this movie the best we can make it. And I felt like I was
the best for the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, what's best for the movie. In a lot of cases on other movies and even movies I made before, that's not necessarily the case. You're like, I spent a lot of time setting this up. I love this scene. I wrote, whatever. It's like, but this was a very different experience for me. And I think that, like, in terms of the editing, that's where we got to. We got to a cut that was about 5 minutes shorter than this one is now. And we all felt, producers and all of I, that was about the bone. That was about as much as we could cut it. And then we started bringing moments back in until we felt, okay, this feels like it. We went back and forth on a lot of stuff too, keeping things in, having people watch it, and then ultimately settled on the cut that you watched.
Two more quick questions.
Take your time. We're not in a rush.
I love talking
about it.
So, the music. Yeah. I would love to have the soundtrack to this movie. It'll
be coming out.
It was my mind's not sharp enough to remember who the composer was. Who wrote?
His name's Bill Brown.
Where did he come from? He was amazing.
Yeah. He's been around, man. I met him 12 years ago when he composed all the music for CSI New York. And that's how we got connected, because I used to work for the creator of CSI New York. And so he and I did a project early on together. I had him do a short of mine called Dig, which is available online if anybody wants to watch it. And I love the music. And literally just since then, there's only one movie he didn't, one feature of mine he didn't score, and that was not my choice. And so the four others he did the music for. He's a fantastic composer. Every movie has had a different sound. And one of the really great things about this movie, and I said to him from the beginning, is I'm like, we are going back to classical, man. Like, we are going back to orchestra.
It's orchestral. It is.
Yep.
I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this is not, 3 instruments or whatever, or
this is a full-on orchestra.
This is full blast. And in the emotional moments of the scene, he comes in with that music and just pushes it right on up.
Yeah. And the great thing is with Bill and I, and the reason why, I've now done 4 features with him. I've done 3 features with my director of photography, Cohen. I've done, multiple features with my, 5 features with my editor. The big reason is that you build that shorthand, so with Bill and I, there's not a lot of, I don't have to go in and sort of rebuild the relationship and rebuild, sort of the dictionary by which we can understand each other. Like, he gets what I mean when I say something about this, because I don't speak in music. I speak in emotion, and he's got to then translate that into notes on a page. And so, but with Bill, it's like, and it's funny because with Bill, oftentimes on the projects, there's a period where we're trying to find it, and I always feel bad because I'm going, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. We don't have it. We don't have it. We don't. And I always feel so bad saying it, but I'm like, I also recognize that, like, I know we're going to get there, and me saying no is going to get us to the yes. And so, and eventually we do. And then once we land on sort of that theme, like, one of the fun parts about this movie is there's themes. I'd never done a movie with themes before, where you had that sort of John Williams, like, Anakin's theme and Luke's theme and like whatever. I'd never done that. In this case, I was like, I think we got to have themes for these characters. I think we got to have a sound that's specific to each character, and yet that works as a cohesive whole for the score. So Bill's great. I mean, I always love working with them, and
please extend my congratulations to him as having
I will, and I'll be sure to send you a link when I know the album. He'll put the album out on Spotify.
Please do, because it was. I came out thinking, that's some of the most beautiful music I've heard that so completely matched the story of the movie.
What was great about this movie was the fact that I can live in the emotional elements of it, which, I mean, when you're making thrillers, when you're doing, just spy movies, you often don't live there, right? It's often about movement and about that kind of thing. But with this movie, like, when I was making it, when I was setting out to make it, my wife and I were talking about it before I left for Montana, and I remember her telling me, like, listen, like, you gotta put your heart in this. Like, you gotta make this movie with heart, and that really stuck with me. And so when we sat down with all the crew and got into our pre-production meeting, our first meeting in Montana, I told everybody, like, you got to make this movie with heart. Like, I understand that it's a job, right?
Mission accomplished.
But yeah, you got to put that into it. And if we do, we're going to make a good movie.
Real last question. What's next for you? I
It's a
mean,
good question.
I've discovered Joshua Caldwell now. I got to follow him right along.
Well, you got 4 other movies you can go back and watch in the meantime.
Yeah, there's one called Euphoria or
no. Well, there's one called Infamous.
Infamous, that's what it is.
Which was divisive. You either love it or you hate it.
It didn't look like the partner to Mending the Line.
It's not. It's not. I mean, the first movie I made was a quiet little indie movie called Layover, which is about a woman who's stuck in LA. She's from Paris. She's on a flight to Singapore. She gets a layover in LA for 12 hours and has this kind of odyssey through Los Angeles. We shot that movie for like $6,000. That's another kind of beautiful little movie. You should check that out for sure.
I will.
The other movies have been in a lot of ways experiments. I mean, Infamous was really about aggression. It was about being unapologetically aggressive in telling the story of a person who is a psychopath or sociopath, one or the other. It's about a woman who basically starts robbing banks and weed stores and gas stations and recording it and putting it up on Instagram. It's sort of a modern Natural Born Killers.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun to make. I loved making that movie. That was a lot of, we shot it in 22 days and I love making the movie. Even if people don't like it, I love making that movie. And I'm very proud of that movie, and so, but what's next for me is really, ensuring that Mending the Line gets the release that it's entitled to. I have another movie coming up that I'm hoping to shoot in February. Can't talk about it. That's the only thing that stinks about some of this stuff is like, it's not public yet, but, and I have a number of other things in development, and on the horizon. And
well, Atlanta is the place to go for movies.
Yeah.
I'm right close to Atlanta.
You're right there. Oh, we'll do a set visit.
Come on down.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you here.
I haven't shot Atlanta yet.
I fell in love with this movie. That's why I pursued you so much.
I appreciate that.
To do the interview. And I get the movie out there so people could see it, because they really are asking, where can I see this? You love it so much. Where can I see it? So
yeah, no, hopefully absolutely. You can't wait to have it
wide distribution. And,
that's what we're hoping for.
And as not just a critic, but as a fan, thank you for making this movie.
Oh, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
All right. Thank you so much, Joshua Caldwell, the director of Mending the Line. Go see it.
Thanks, Jackie.